Today we are diving deep into something we all go through, but no one ever wants to talk about: grief and loss.
It is hard to talk about.
You shared this article from helpguide.org with me, and it seems like a really solid place to start.
It covers pretty much everything, yeah.
Okay, cool.
It really is a really comprehensive resource.
That's what we like for these deep dives,
Yeah.
to really cover all the angles, and it looks like this one does that.
It does.
It covers the types of grief and what it looks like and symptoms and coping and finding help and all of that. So
It's a good one.
I'm ready.
Yeah.
I'm excited to learn, and I have a feeling that I'm going to learn something along the way that's going to surprise me.
Yeah.
Because, when we say grief, we tend to think of death, right? That's
the big one.
the big one.
Yeah,
But there's so much more to it than that.
there is.
So that's one of the things I'm excited to kind of unpack.
Absolutely.
And this article does a good job of kind of expanding what can cause grief.
Yeah.
It's not just about death.
It's anything that's important to us.
Right.
Anything that we lose.
Okay, so let's unpack that.
Okay.
What are some examples of less obvious losses that can trigger grief?
Well, major life transitions like divorce.
Okay.
Or losing your job.
Oh, yeah.
Or selling the family home. Or retiring.
Oh, yeah.
Huge shifts in identity
Totally.
routine.
Mm-hmm.
So it's natural to grieve what we're leaving behind.
It's almost like grieving a version of yourself,
That's a good way to put it.
the person that you were in that specific context.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah, and even smaller things
Right.
can have a big impact, like losing a cherished dream
Yeah.
or facing a serious illness.
Mm.
These can trigger grief too, even though we might not label it as such.
That makes me think about all the times where I've felt this pang of sadness or disappointment over something, and I'm like, it's not a big deal.
Right.
But maybe I was experiencing grief and didn't realize it.
You might have been.
Yeah.
We're often told to buck up or move on from those smaller losses.
Mm.
But acknowledging them and allowing ourselves to feel the feelings is an important part of processing them.
Okay, so then what does processing look like?
Right.
What is the grieving process like?
Well, this is where those common myths about grief can really trip us up.
Oh, absolutely.
We have all these ideas about how we're supposed to grieve,
Yeah.
which would make it even
Well,
more
there's
difficult.
For sure. Time heals all wounds,
Yeah.
all that stuff.
You should be over it by now.
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay, so let's bust some myths.
Okay.
What's the first one that comes to mind?
Well, how about the idea that ignoring pain makes it go away faster?
Oh, yeah.
Just
Just keep busy and you'll be fine.
keep busy.
Yeah, I've tried that one.
Yeah. It doesn't work.
It does not work.
It really does.
Yeah.
This article really emphasizes that facing your grief head on is really crucial for healing.
Oh, okay.
So trying to bury those feelings will only make them resurface later, and often with more intensity.
It's like trying to keep a beach ball underwater.
That's a good one.
Eventually, it's going to pop back up.
And probably hit you in the face.
And probably hit you in the face.
Right.
Hard.
Yes.
Okay, so don't do that.
So don't ignore your pain.
Face it head on.
Yes.
What's another one?
That being strong means suppressing your emotions.
Ah.
Yeah,
be strong for the family.
Don't let them see you cry.
Yes, exactly.
While those sentiments come from a place of caring,
Mm-hmm.
they can actually be quite damaging.
Yeah.
The truth is, allowing ourselves to feel those emotions,
Okay.
to cry if we need to, is actually healthier for us and those around us.
Really?
It allows for a genuine connection and support.
So vulnerability is strength.
Absolutely.
Okay.
And on that note, let's address the myth that if you don't cry, it means you don't care.
Right. Yeah.
That's not true at all.
Grief affects everyone so differently.
Exactly. Some people express it very outwardly, and some people are more internal processors.
Yeah.
There's no right or wrong way to grieve.
Okay.
Tears aren't the only measure of how deeply someone is hurting.
Okay, so we've busted a few myths about emotional expression.
Right.
What about myths surrounding the timeline of grief?
Yes.
Is there anything there?
Definitely.
How long should this take?
Yeah, the idea that grieving should last about a year.
Oh, yeah. The
The
1 year mark.
as if there's an expiration date on sadness.
You've got to be better by then.
Right.
Yep.
That could
Yeah.
be so invalidating for people
Yeah.
whose grief lingers longer or resurfaces unexpectedly.
Yeah.
And the reality is there's no set time frame for this.
Okay.
Some people may feel better relatively quickly, while others may take years.
Yeah.
It all depends on the individual,
Okay.
the nature of the loss, and the support that they have.
So comparing your timeline to someone else's is a recipe for disaster.
Exactly.
Okay.
And speaking of inadequate,
Yeah.
this next myth,
Okay.
This one really gets under my skin.
Okay.
The idea that moving on means forgetting.
Oh.
As if healing requires erasing the person or the experience
I was just thinking that.
from our lives completely.
Yeah, because I've heard people say that or say something along those lines, and it feels
It feels wrong,
wrong.
doesn't it?
Yes, because it makes me feel like if I do move on or if I do feel better, then I'm somehow betraying them.
Right, and you're not.
Yeah.
The Help Guide article beautifully explains
Okay.
that moving on is about acceptance,
Okay.
not erasure.
Okay.
Those memories, those experiences, they become part of who we are.
Yeah.
They shape our perspective and inform our future.
So it's more about integrating that loss into your life
Yes.
and finding a way to carry it with you without letting it consume you.
Exactly.
Okay.
It's a process, not a light switch.
Right.
It takes time.
Yeah.
And it will look different for everyone.
Okay, so we've busted some of those kind of like more harmful
Right.
misconceptions.
Yeah.
What can you tell us about the actual grieving process? Because we know it's different for everyone,
It is.
but are there any like common threads or any helpful points to keep in mind?
There are.
Okay.
And the article outlines 6 key points for dealing with grief.
Okay.
The first and foremost, acknowledging your pain
Okay.
is vital.
So don't try to...
Don't try to pretend you're not hurting
Yeah.
or minimize your feelings.
Right, which goes back to facing it head on.
Exactly.
Okay.
And next, it's important to accept the wide range of emotions that might come up.
Okay.
You might experience shock, sadness, anger, guilt, even relief.
Wow.
And all of those are valid.
So it's more like a roller coaster than like a
That's a great analogy.
straight path.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah.
It's a roller coaster of emotions.
Gotcha.
The third point is understanding that your grieving process will be unique to you.
Okay.
Don't compare your experience to others
Right.
or judge yourself for how you're coping.
Yeah.
You're on your own timeline.
Got it. No comparing timelines.
Right.
What about the role of support in the grieving process?
Support is huge.
Okay.
Point number 4 emphasizes the importance of seeking face-to-face support.
Okay.
Talk to friends, talk to family, talk to a therapist.
Yeah.
These can make a huge difference in processing those emotions.
I bet.
And number 5
Yeah.
reminds us to take care of ourselves physically.
Oh, yeah.
Grief can be exhausting both emotionally and physically.
Totally.
So make sure you're eating well, getting enough sleep, and even getting some exercise can really help.
So self-care isn't selfish.
It's not selfish,
It's actually essential.
essential.
Okay.
And finally, the article highlights the importance of recognizing the difference between grief and depression.
Okay.
While grief can involve periods of sadness, depression is a more persistent and debilitating condition,
Okay.
and that may require professional help.
That's a good distinction because I think sometimes people might feel sad and think that they're depressed, but it's good to know the difference.
Right. And if those feelings of sadness are overwhelming or interfering with your daily life, seek professional support.
Okay, so if it's starting to really impact your life
Yes.
in a negative way, then
Yeah.
that's probably a sign to go talk to someone.
Exactly.
Okay, cool.
Now, I know you mentioned the 5 stages of grief earlier,
Yeah.
and while they're widely known, I think it's crucial to approach this topic with a bit of caution.
Okay. I'm intrigued. Tell me more.
Okay, so as you know, the 5 stages are denial, anger, bargaining, depression, and acceptance.
Yes.
But they've often been misunderstood and misapplied.
Okay.
They were initially based on Elizabeth Kubler-Ross's work with terminally ill patients,
Right.
not those grieving a loss.
Okay.
So the context is different.
So applying it as like a one-size-fits-all to every type of grief
Right. It doesn't work.
is probably not accurate.
It's not accurate.
Okay.
And even more importantly, Kubler-Ross herself cautioned against using these stages as a rigid framework. So she acknowledged that not everyone goes through all 5 stages, and they don't necessarily occur in a linear order.
So it's not a checklist.
It's not a checklist.
For grief.
No.
Okay.
The stages are more like potential responses to loss.
Okay.
They don't dictate everyone's grieving experience.
Gotcha. So there's no right or wrong way to experience this.
Exactly.
If you don't hit every stage in perfect order, that's okay.
That's okay.
Okay, so if the 5 stages aren't the best way to conceptualize grief,
Right.
what is?
Well, the article offers an alternative analogy
Okay.
that I find quite useful, and that's the roller coaster.
The roller coaster. Okay, I'm listening.
Think of grief as a roller coaster
Okay.
with its ups and downs and twists and turns. In the beginning, the ride might be really intense with those lows feeling incredibly deep and long.
Yeah.
But as time goes on, those lows become less intense and shorter,
Okay.
while the highs might start to last a bit longer.
So the ride smooths out a little bit?
It does.
You learn to navigate the turns better?
Exactly.
Okay.
And it's important to remember that even years later,
Yeah.
grief can resurface unexpectedly.
Oh, yeah.
Something as simple as a song or a scent or a special occasion
Oh, yeah.
can trigger those familiar feelings.
Those can really sneak up on you.
They do.
It's like you're having a good day and then bam,
Right.
here it comes.
Exactly. And that's normal.
Okay.
It doesn't mean that you haven't healed
Okay.
or that you're backsliding.
Okay.
It's just a part of the ongoing process of living with loss.
So be kind to yourself.
Yes.
Let those moments happen.
Allow those moments.
Okay.
Grief is a journey, not a destination.
Okay.
And it's one that we navigate in our own time and our own way.
Okay, so we focused mainly on the emotional side of grief.
Mm-hmm.
The article also mentions physical symptoms, which we don't always associate with loss.
Yeah.
So what are some of those less obvious ways that grief can show up in the body?
Well, grief isn't just an emotional experience.
Yeah.
It affects us on a physical level, too. Of course, there are the expected emotional symptoms like sadness, shock, guilt, fear, and anger.
Right, those are no walk in the park either.
No, they're not.
Okay.
But beyond those, grief can manifest in ways that we might not immediately connect to the loss.
Okay.
Things like fatigue, nausea, even lowered immunity are potential physical symptoms.
Wow. So grief can make you physically sick.
It can.
That's wild.
It's true. The mind and body are very connected.
Yeah.
And when we're experiencing intense emotional distress,
Yeah.
it can really take a toll on our physical well-being.
That's a good reminder that we need to take care of ourselves holistically.
Yes.
Okay, so fatigue, nausea, lowered immunity. What else?
You might experience changes in appetite leading to either weight loss or gain.
Okay.
Aches and pains, difficulty sleeping.
Yeah.
These are all common as well.
So grief can really throw the body off balance.
It can.
Are there certain types of grief that we should be aware of?
There are a couple
Okay.
that are often overlooked or misunderstood. One is anticipatory grief, which, as the name suggests, occurs before the actual loss.
So you're grieving something that hasn't happened yet.
Yes.
What would be an example of that?
Okay, so imagine someone you love is facing a terminal illness.
Right.
The grief that you experience during that time, knowing you'll eventually lose them.
Okay.
That's anticipatory grief.
Oh, okay.
Or it could be related to a significant life change that's coming, like a planned separation or a big move.
That sounds emotionally complicated.
It is.
To be grieving something that is still, in a sense, part of your present reality.
It is. There can be a lot of mixed emotions.
Yeah.
And some people might even feel guilty about experiencing grief before the loss.
Right, like they're betraying the person or the
Yeah.
situation by grieving too soon.
Exactly.
But it makes sense that your mind and heart would start processing that
It does.
beforehand.
It's like a preemptive
Yeah.
grieving process.
Okay. And even though it's difficult, it can also offer an opportunity for closure, to say goodbyes, to really cherish the time that remains.
Exactly.
So there can be a silver lining to it as well.
There can be.
What's another type of grief?
Another lesser-known type of grief is disenfranchised grief.
Disenfranchised grief.
Yes.
Okay, I haven't heard of that one.
This type of grief occurs when a loss isn't socially recognized or acknowledged as significant.
Oh, okay.
And sometimes those experiencing it are even told they shouldn't be grieving,
Wow.
which can make it even harder to cope.
So it's almost like their grief is invalidated
It is.
because it doesn't fit the mold.
Yeah.
Okay.
So, for example, the loss of a pet is often minimized,
Oh, yeah.
even though for many people a pet is a beloved member of the family.
Absolutely.
Or someone might experience disenfranchised grief after a miscarriage where the loss of the potential child
Yeah.
isn't always understood
Yeah.
or acknowledged.
Yeah, that's hard.
Yeah. And it's not limited to those specific situations.
Okay.
It can happen with the loss of a friend, a colleague, or even the loss of a dream or goal.
So things that don't fit neatly in the box
Yeah.
of what society deems as acceptable.
Exactly, to grieve.
Disenfranchised grief highlights the importance of understanding that everyone experiences loss differently.
Right.
And all grief is valid, regardless of societal norms or expectations.
That's such a good point.
Yeah.
There's no, you can't put parameters around grief.
No.
It's so individual.
It is.
And that brings us to finding support,
Right.
which can be challenging
Yeah.
for anyone who's grieving, especially people experiencing disenfranchised grief.
Yes.
So the article really stresses the importance of connecting with others.
It does, and it makes sense from an evolutionary standpoint.
Okay.
Human beings are social creatures.
Right.
We are wired for connection.
Yeah.
And that need for connection doesn't disappear when we're grieving.
Right.
In fact, it becomes even more important.
So even though it might feel counterintuitive,
Mm-hmm.
reaching out is really important.
It is.
The article offers several suggestions for finding support, and we'll dig into those a little bit later.
Yeah.
But for now, I think it's important to acknowledge that even though the grieving process can feel very solitary, you're not alone in this journey.
That's a great note to end this part of the conversation on.
Yeah.
We've covered so much ground already.
We have.
We've talked about debunking the myths,
Yes.
understanding the emotional, physical aspects of grief, exploring those different types of loss,
Yeah.
and the importance of seeking support.
Mm.
So
This is great.
it's a lot,
It is.
but it's really valuable information.
It is. We've just scratched the surface.
Yeah.
We're going to go into coping mechanisms and self-care and all of that
Yeah.
in the next part of our conversation.
Okay, so stick with us as we continue to dive deep into the world of grief and loss.
Yes. Welcome back to our deep dive on grief and loss.
Good to be back.
Yeah.
We've covered a lot of ground already, but
We have.
I'm excited to get into some of the more practical aspects.
Of coping with grief.
Yeah,
Because in that last part of the conversation, we were talking about self-care.
right.
And I think that's where a lot of people struggle.
It is,
It's one thing to understand it.
Yeah, they know they're supposed to do it,
Yeah.
but it's like how,
But how? Yeah.
especially when
When you're overwhelmed with sadness,
yes.
it can just feel impossible.
It feels impossible. It's
Yeah.
one thing to understand self-care intellectually,
Yeah.
but putting it into practice during a time of intense grief is a whole other challenge.
Right.
Fortunately, this Help Guide article offers some really helpful suggestions.
Okay, good.
And one of the key things it emphasizes is the importance of facing our feelings rather than trying to suppress them.
Yeah, we touched on that earlier when we were debunking those myths.
Right.
It's so tempting
It is.
to just try to push those feelings down
Yes.
and pretend they're not there.
It's a very human instinct
Yeah.
to want to avoid pain.
But as we discussed, avoiding those emotions only prolongs the grieving process.
It's like trying to outrun a shadow.
It's going to catch up to you.
Yeah, eventually it will.
So instead of running, we need to turn and face that shadow.
Okay, but how do we do that
Right.
without being like totally swallowed by it?
That's where finding healthy ways to express those emotions comes in.
Okay.
The article suggests things like journaling or creating art
Hmm.
as therapeutic outlets.
Okay.
Have you ever tried either of those during times of emotional distress?
I've dabbled in journaling.
Okay.
I'm more of a talk it out kind of person.
Okay.
So like if I'm struggling with something, I tend to just call a friend
Gotcha.
and just vent.
Yeah.
But there's something about the journaling process that's fascinating to me.
Yeah.
The idea that it's like having a conversation with yourself.
Yeah.
It
It allows you to process those thoughts and feelings
Right.
without judgment or interruption.
Without judgment and
Yeah.
without having to like censor myself.
And make sure I'm saying the right thing.
Yeah. You can just let it all out.
Yeah.
Even if it's messy or doesn't make sense.
Yeah. It's like giving yourself permission
It is permission.
to be totally raw and vulnerable
Yes.
and not worry about what anyone's going to think.
Exactly. And that can be so cathartic,
Yeah.
especially during grief when those emotions can feel so overwhelming.
Mm-hmm.
And even the act of writing itself can be a release,
Oh, okay.
like a way to externalize those feelings and create a little distance from them.
So if someone's new to journaling,
Right.
where would you suggest they start?
Well, I always recommend starting simple.
Okay.
Don't put too much pressure on yourself to
Yeah.
write beautifully or create a masterpiece.
Right.
Just start by getting words on the page.
Okay.
Some people find it helpful to free write,
Oh,
just let their thoughts flow without any structure or goal in mind.
Okay.
Others prefer to use prompts like, what am I feeling right now?
Oh, yeah.
Or what's one thing I'm grateful for today? I like prompts
Yeah.
because sometimes it is hard to just
It is hard to just
let them nothing.
start from a blank page.
Yeah.
Remember, you don't have to share your journal with anyone.
Right.
It's for your eyes, only a private space to process and explore.
Okay, that's good to remember.
So we talked about journaling.
Yeah, what about art? It's a
Oh.
form of self-expression.
Art can be an incredibly powerful way to access and express emotions that words might not be able to capture,
Okay.
like a different language,
Mm-hmm.
one that speaks to deeper parts of ourselves.
Okay.
And it doesn't matter if you're not a talented artist.
Okay.
The point is to use creativity as a means of processing your grief,
Yeah.
not to create a masterpiece.
So we're talking like finger painting and Play-Doh.
Exactly.
Anything goes.
Anything goes.
Right.
Anything that allows you to express yourself freely and authentically.
Cool.
Don't censor yourself
Okay.
or worry about making it good.
I like that.
Just let your intuition guide you and see what emerges.
Mm-hmm.
You know, you might be surprised by what you create
Mm-hmm.
and what you discover about yourself in the process.
It's about giving yourself permission to be messy
It is.
and to play,
And to play, yeah.
even in the midst of sadness.
Exactly. Grief doesn't mean we have to shut down all other aspects of ourselves.
Okay.
Allowing ourselves to experience joy and pleasure
Right.
through creative expression is part of the healing process.
Yeah.
And that leads us to another important point the article makes.
Okay.
Maintaining hobbies and interests.
This one can be tricky
It can be.
because when you're grieving, you just lose interest in everything.
You do.
I remember after my grandmother passed away, I
Mhm.
couldn't even bring myself to read a book,
Yeah.
and I love reading.
I can relate to that.
It's like everything just shuts down.
It's common to experience a lack of motivation and enjoyment
Yeah.
in those activities that used to bring you pleasure.
Yeah.
It's like a part of you has shut down,
Mm-hmm.
Conserving energy for that difficult task of grief.
So how do you coax that part of yourself back to life?
Right.
Yeah.
Well, I wouldn't say it's about forcing yourself to
Okay.
enjoy things. It's more about gently nudging ourselves
Okay.
back towards those activities that once brought us joy.
So if I'm feeling unmotivated to read, I just pick up a book.
Maybe you just start by picking up a book for 5 minutes, even if you don't actually read anything.
Yeah, just hold it.
Right. Just being in the presence of something familiar
Okay.
can be a starting point.
Baby steps.
Baby steps.
Okay.
Creating small wins that gradually build momentum.
Gotcha.
And who knows?
Yeah.
You might find as you spend more time with that activity that spark of enjoyment starts to flicker again.
I like that.
Yeah.
It's about respecting where you are in the process.
Yes.
But also like gently encouraging yourself to move
Yes.
towards those things that are good for you.
Exactly. And it's important to remember that there's no right or wrong way to grieve
Right.
and no set timeline. For healing,
Yeah.
the article emphasizes giving yourself permission to feel without judgment or pressure.
It's so easy to put pressure on yourself
It is.
and to feel guilty or to feel ashamed
Yeah,
that you're not doing it right.
exactly.
But there is no right way to do this.
There isn't.
If you're angry one day and numb the next day, that's okay.
It's okay.
If you need to cry for a week straight, that's okay.
It's okay.
It's about honoring your own unique
It is.
grieving process
Yeah.
and your own pace.
So far, we've focused mainly on emotional self-care.
Right.
But what about physical self-care?
Yeah.
The article emphasizes the importance of taking care of our bodies during times of loss.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah.
Because when you're grieving sometimes,
You just don't.
you just don't have the energy.
You don't have the energy.
You don't sleep well.
You don't eat well.
You don't eat well. You don't exercise,
Right.
all that good stuff.
It's true. Grief can be incredibly taxing on the body,
Mm-hmm.
both physically and emotionally.
Yeah.
It depletes our energy reserves,
Yeah.
disrupts our sleep patterns,
Mm.
and can even suppress our immune system,
Wow.
making us more susceptible to illness.
Okay, so it's even more important
Yes.
when you're grieving to be taking care of yourself.
It is essential.
So what are some practical things that people can do?
Right.
I imagine it starts with the basics, sleep.
It does.
Nutrition.
Sleep, nutrition, hydration.
Hydration, yeah.
Yeah.
So when it comes to sleep,
Right.
what would you suggest?
Try to establish a regular sleep-wake cycle,
Okay.
even if you're struggling with insomnia.
Which can be tough, but I imagine like creating a bedtime routine
Yes.
might be helpful.
It can be very helpful taking a warm bath, reading a book, dimming the lights. All of those things.
So just things that signal to the body it's time to wind down.
Exactly. It's about creating a sense of calm and predictability in your environment,
Okay.
which can soothe that nervous system.
Mm-hmm.
And what about nutrition?
Well, when I'm stressed or sad, I tend to reach for the comfort foods,
That's understandable.
which aren't always the healthiest.
Right.
So what are some tips for making sure that you are giving your body what it needs?
Right. Well, it's understandable to crave those comfort foods.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
During times of emotional distress,
Yeah,
food could be a source of solace and familiarity,
totally.
but it's also important to make sure you're getting the nutrients
Yeah.
your body needs to function optimally,
Okay.
especially when we're under stress.
Okay.
I'm not saying deprive yourself of those treats,
Right.
but Try to incorporate plenty of fruits and vegetables and whole grains into your diet.
Okay.
And don't underestimate the power of hydration.
Yeah.
Drinking plenty of water throughout the day can really help.
Okay, so just all the basics really matter.
They do.
Okay, what about exercise?
Okay.
Is that really necessary?
Well, it can be surprisingly beneficial.
Yeah.
I'm not talking about intense workouts
Okay.
or marathon training. Even gentle exercise like walking, stretching can release endorphins,
Okay.
which have mood-boosting effects.
So just moving your body in a way that feels good.
Exactly. Listen to your body and choose activities that feel supportive and energizing.
And if you can get out in nature, even better.
Yes.
Combine those two.
Yes.
Okay, cool. So the article also mentions the importance of planning ahead
It's done.
for grief triggers.
Yes.
Can you elaborate on that a bit?
Of course.
Because I feel like those can really sneak up on you.
They can.
Like you're going about your day and then all of a sudden it hits you like
Right.
it's the anniversary of your loved one's passing.
Exactly.
And then you just get hit with this wave of emotion.
It's a visceral experience.
No.
Being hit with that wave of grief unexpectedly. That's why planning ahead can be so helpful.
Okay.
It's not about avoiding those feelings or pretending they don't exist.
Okay.
It's about being prepared
Okay.
for their arrival
Yeah.
and having a plan in place for how you want to navigate those days.
So like if you know a certain anniversary is coming up,
Mm-hmm.
take some time to think about how you want to honor that day.
Exactly. And don't be afraid to communicate your nights
Okay.
to those around you. Let them know that you might be struggling
Yeah.
and might need extra support.
It's about being proactive.
Proactive, yes.
Okay.
And having that support system in place.
Okay, so we've talked a lot about self-care.
We have.
But let's circle back to the importance of seeking support from others.
Yes.
We touched on this in the first part of the conversation.
Yeah, we did.
But I think it's worth diving a bit deeper.
I agree. Seeking support is crucial.
Oh,
Leaning on friends and family, talking to a therapist or grief counselor, connecting with others who have experienced similar losses. These are all valuable ways to navigate this challenging terrain.
sometimes it's just easier
Yeah.
to talk to someone who's not personally involved,
Right.
you know?
Yeah.
A therapist can offer that fresh perspective,
Yes.
you know?
It's a safe space.
And you don't feel like you're burdening
Right.
your loved ones with
Yeah.
your problems.
And therapists and grief counselors, they're trained to help people navigate
Right.
the grieving process.
Yeah.
They can provide tools and strategies for coping with difficult emotions.
Right.
And they can also help you address any underlying mental health concerns that might be contributing to your struggles.
And there's no shame in that.
No.
In fact, I think it's a sign of strength
It
and
is.
self-awareness to say, I need help.
It shows that you're taking your mental health seriously
Yeah.
and that you're committed to healing.
I love that.
Okay, so we've covered a lot of ground
We have.
when it comes to grief and loss.
Yeah.
We've debunked myths,
Mm-hmm.
explored the grieving process,
Yeah.
discussed the importance of self-care and seeking support.
Mm-hmm.
So what are some key takeaways
Right.
you'd like our listeners to remember as we move into the final part
Okay.
of our deep dive?
Okay, so key takeaways.
Well, first and foremost, it's crucial to remember that grief is a natural and normal
Okay.
response to loss.
So don't judge yourself
Don't judge yourself.
for feeling it.
And there's no right or wrong way to grieve.
Okay.
And everyone's journey is unique.
Gotcha.
And remember, healing takes time.
Okay.
Be patient with yourself and allow the process to unfold at its own pace.
So no rushing it.
No rushing it.
It's a journey, not a race.
Exactly.
And along that journey,
Yes,
it's essential to prioritize self-care.
it is.
I mean-
Taking care of your physical and emotional needs,
Mm-hmm.
finding healthy outlets for your emotions,
Yeah.
and engaging in those activities that bring you joy, even if it's just for a few moments each day.
So self-care isn't selfish.
It's not selfish.
It's necessary
It's essential
for healing.
for healing.
And you don't have to go through this alone.
You don't.
Reach out to your loved ones, join a support group, or seek professional help.
Mm-hmm.
All of those are great options.
Support is out there, and asking for help is a sign of strength.
I love that.
And finally, remember that while grief can be incredibly painful,
Yeah.
it can also be transformative.
Okay.
It can teach us about resilience, compassion, and the power of human connection.
So it can crack you open, but it can also make you stronger.
It can.
Yeah,
More
it's-
empathetic,
yes,
more
yeah.
connected to ourselves and others.
Yeah.
And as we move through this process, we can emerge with a deeper appreciation
Okay.
for life and a renewed sense of purpose.
That's helpful.
It is.
Okay, so we've covered a lot.
We have.
We're going to take a short break,
Okay.
and then we'll be back to explore the concept of moving on
Yes.
and what it really means in the context of grief and loss. And we are back for the final part of our deep dive into grief and loss.
It's been a great conversation.
Yeah, we've covered a lot.
A lot of ground, yeah.
But there's one more crucial aspect I want to explore with you, and that's the concept of moving on. It's a phrase that gets thrown around a lot, but what does it actually mean in the context of grief?
That's such a great question. And it's one that often causes a lot of confusion and even guilt
Yeah.
for people who are grieving.
Right.
The Health Guide article does a really nice job of reframing this idea.
Okay.
And it emphasizes that moving on isn't about forgetting the person or the experience that we've lost.
Oh.
It's not about erasing them from our lives or pretending like the pain never existed.
So it's not about achieving closure and then the grief magically disappears?
Right. True healing doesn't come from shutting the door on grief,
Okay.
but rather from integrating it into our lives,
Yeah.
allowing it to shape us and inform our journey moving forward.
So it becomes like a part of your internal landscape.
Hmm.
It's always there, but it doesn't have to dominate the terrain.
That's a beautiful way to put it, yeah.
Yeah.
Moving on is about finding ways to honor the person or the experience that we've lost, while continuing to live our lives,
Yeah.
to find joy, to pursue our goals, and to connect with others.
So it's more about evolution than erasure.
Exactly. We carry those memories with us,
Yeah.
but we don't let them define us or hold us back.
So it's about finding a new normal,
It is finding a new normal.
one that incorporates the loss,
Mm-hmm.
but also allows for growth and healing and happiness.
And happiness, exactly.
I'm struck by this idea that you can find happiness again after experiencing a significant loss.
Yeah.
It feels counterintuitive, but the article suggests that's not only possible, but it's a healthy part of moving forward.
I think it's important to emphasize that finding happiness again doesn't diminish the love that we had for the person
Right.
or the significance of the experience that we've lost.
Right.
It's not about replacing them or forgetting them.
Right.
It's about recognizing that our capacity for love and joy is expansive,
Okay.
and it can coexist with grief.
So it's like your heart expands to hold both.
Yes.
The grief and the joy.
Exactly. It's not an either situation.
And I think that's a really empowering message.
It is empowering.
For people who are grieving,
Yeah.
it gives them permission
Yeah.
to laugh again and love again and dream again.
Knowing that they're not betraying
Yeah.
the person that they lost.
It's about honoring the past, but embracing the present and the future.
Beautifully said, yes.
And it's important to remember that this process doesn't happen overnight.
It does. It's a process.
It's gradual and it will look different for everyone.
Absolutely.
So no need to rush it or judge yourself if you're not over it by a certain point.
No judgment.
Okay, good.
Grief has its own timeline.
So we need to respect that.
We do.
There will be ups and downs, twists and turns, moments of intense sadness and moments of unexpected joy.
The roller coaster analogy
Yeah,
definitely applies.
applies here too.
And I think it's helpful to remember, just as those intense lows become less frequent
Yeah.
and less intense, over time, those moments of joy and peace become more frequent and more enduring.
That's hopeful.
It is hopeful.
It's nice to know that even though it feels all-consuming
Yeah.
in the beginning,
It doesn't have to stay that way.
it doesn't have to stare that way.
And I think the more we learn about grief,
Yeah,
the more we normalize it
right.
as a natural part of life.
Yeah.
The better equipped we'll be to support ourselves and others through this experience.
Well, this has been incredibly insightful for me. I hope it has been for our listeners as well.
Me too.
We've covered so much,
Covered a lot.
debunking myths,
Yes.
exploring all these different ways that grief can manifest,
Mhm.
the importance of self-care and finding support,
And moving on.
and moving on.
Yeah.
I like how we reframed that.
Me too.
It's not about forgetting, it's about integrating it into your life.
It is.
Okay, so before we wrap up, is there anything else that you want to leave our listeners with?
I think the most important thing to remember is that you're not alone in this.
Yeah.
Grief is a universal experience, and while it can feel very isolating, there are countless others who understand what you're going through.
Right?
Reach out to them,
Yeah.
lean on them, and allow them to support you.
Yeah.
And remember, there's no shame in seeking professional help if you need it.
Absolutely.
Therapists and grief counselors can provide invaluable guidance and tools.
So, listeners, I encourage you to go revisit this article we discussed today from helpguide.org.
Yes, it's a great resource.
Yeah, tons of information in there and practical advice for coping with grief and loss.
Take what resonates with you.
Yeah.
Leave what doesn't.
And remember, your grief journey is your own.
It is.
There's no right or wrong way to do it.
And as you navigate that journey, remember to be kind to yourself.
Yes.
Be patient with the process.
Yeah.
And celebrate those small victories along the way.
I love that.
Healing is possible.
Okay.
And hope is always within reach.
Thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive into grief and loss. Until next time, take care.